20 years of marriage, 2 decades of building a life together. And she wanted to celebrate at the most expensive country club in town. I should have known something was off when she insisted on this place, specifically, when she'd never shown interest in golf or fancy dinners before. But I figured, hey, 20 years deserves something special, right? The valet took my keys as we pulled up to the marble entrance of Oakwood Country Club. The place screamed old money with its perfectly manicured lawns and members who probably inherited their wealth 3 generations back. My wife stepped out first, smoothing down her red dress and checking her reflection in the car window. She looked nervous, but I thought it was just the fancy atmosphere getting to her. "I'll be right back, honey. Just need to grab something from the car," she said, her voice a little too sweet. That should have been red flag number 1, but I was too focused on not embarrassing myself in front of the club staff. I walked toward the entrance, adjusting my tie and trying to look like I belonged there. The doorman nodded respectfully, and I felt a surge of pride. 20 years of hard work had brought us here. I could afford this now. We had earned this celebration. That's when the valet jogged up beside me, glancing around nervously before speaking in a low voice. "Sir, excuse me, but I think you need to know something. Your wife, she put something in your wine glass while you were parking. I saw her through the window. She crushed up some kind of pill or powder and stirred it in with her finger." My blood went cold. "What did you say?" "I'm sorry, sir, but I had to tell you." She looked around to make sure no one was watching, but I was cleaning the windows right there. "She definitely put something in your drink. The one on the left side of your table." I stared at this kid, probably 19 years old, risking his job to warn a complete stranger. My mind raced through possibilities. Maybe it was some kind of surprise, like those fizzy tablets that change the color of drinks. Maybe she was trying to be romantic in some weird way. But deep down, I knew better. "Thank you," I told him, slipping a 20 into his hand. "You did the right thing." I walked back into the dining room with my heart pounding, but my face completely calm. She was sitting at our table, checking her phone and smiling at something on the screen. The wine glasses sat exactly where the valet had described. 2 glasses of expensive Bordeaux that the Sierre had recommended. "There you are," she said, looking up with that same sweet smile. "I was starting to think you got lost, just admiring the architecture," I replied, taking my seat. The wine glass sat innocently to my left, dark red liquid that could hide anything. "This place really is something else." She nodded eagerly. "I thought you'd love it. We should have done this years ago." Her eyes kept darting to my wine glass, then back to my face. "Aren't you going to try the wine? The sommeliers said it was their best vintage." "Of course." I picked up the glass and held it up toward her. "But first, let's make a toast. To our future together." "To our future," she repeated, lifting her own glass. Here's where I made the move that saved my life. As we clinked glasses, I smoothly switched them in the motion, a trick I'd learned at a magic show years ago. The glass that had been on my left was now in her hand, and mine was safely in my right. She didn't notice. She was too focused on watching me drink, waiting for whatever she'd put in there to take effect. We both took a sip, and I washed her face carefully. Nothing. No recognition that anything had changed. "This really is excellent wine," I said, taking another small sip from what had originally been her glass. "You have great taste." She beamed at me, completely unaware that she'd just consumed whatever poison she'd intended for me. "I do my research," she said, then took a larger gulp of the wine. only the best for my husband. The irony of that statement would have been funny if it wasn't so terrifying. We ordered dinner, made small talk about the club's history, and I watched her like a hawk. She seemed normal for the first few minutes, chatting about the other diners and complimenting the decor. But then I noticed her blinking more frequently. Her speech started to slow down just slightly. "Are you feeling all right?" I asked, genuine concern in my voice. "You look a little pale." "I'm fine," she said, but her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. "Just excited about tonight, I guess." 8 minutes. That's how long it took. She was in the middle of telling me about some vacation she wanted to take when her words started slurring. Then her eyes rolled back and she started convulsing violently, her chair scraping against the marble floor as her body jerked uncontrollably. The dining room erupted in chaos. Other diners jumped up from their tables, and I immediately shouted for help while kneeling beside her. "Call 911. She's having some kind of seizure." The club's medical staff appeared within seconds. A retired doctor who was dining with his wife and a nurse who worked part-time as a server. They quickly assessed the situation while I held her head to prevent injury. "What did she eat or drink?" the doctor asked urgently as he checked her pulse. "Just wine," I said, then made the decision that sealed her fate. But I think she might have taken something. I saw her put a pill or powder in her wine glass before dinner. I thought it was some kind of supplement, but now the nurse immediately called poison control while the doctor continued his assessment. The paramedics arrived within minutes, and I gave them the same information. They worked quickly to stabilize her, and I watched as the woman who tried to kill me fought for her own life instead. The ambulance ride to the hospital was surreal. She lay unconscious on the stretcher, machines beeping around her while the paramedics worked to keep her stable. I sat in the corner watching this woman I'd shared a bed with for 20 years, knowing she'd just tried to murder me. The emergency room doctor was a sharp woman in her 40s who didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Mr. Johnson, can you tell me exactly what your wife consumed tonight?" 2 glasses of wine, maybe 3 sips each. But she put something in her glass beforehand. I saw her crush up what looked like a pill or tablet. I kept my voice steady. "Clinical. The valet at the country club witnessed it too." She nodded grimly. "The symptoms are consistent with poisoning. Her blood work should tell us more. But we're treating for multiple possibilities." "Did she seem depressed lately? Any talk of self-harm?" "No, nothing like that." I paused, letting the weight of what I was about to say settle. "Doctor, I need to be completely honest with you. She didn't put that substance in her own wine. She put it in mine." The doctor's pen stopped moving. "Excuse me." The valet warned me. She thought she was drinking from my glass, but I switched them during our toast. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, like I was describing someone else's life. She was trying to poison me. The color drained from the doctor's face. "Are you certain about this?" "Completely certain. The young man who parks cars saw her do it. He risked his job to warn me." She excused herself and returned 5 minutes later with a police officer and a hospital security guard. The cop was a veteran detective named Williams, probably in his 50s, with tired eyes that had seemed too much. "Sir, I need you to walk me through everything that happened tonight from the beginning." So I did. Every detail from her insistence on the expensive restaurant to the valet's warning to the glass switch. Williams took notes and asked pointed questions about our marriage, our finances, whether she had life insurance policies on me. "We need to search her belongings," he said finally. "Do you know where her purse is?" The club staff brought it in the ambulance. I pointed to the small black leather bag sitting on the visitor chair. You'll need a warrant, though, won't you? Emergency circumstances. If there's evidence of attempted murder, we can search now and sort out the legalities later. He pulled on latex gloves and carefully opened her purse. What he found made my stomach turn. First, a small glass vial with white residue at the bottom. Then, a printout from some online chemistry forum discussing untraceable methods and symptoms that mimic natural causes. Behind that, a life insurance policy I'd never seen before, taken out on me just 6 months ago. $2 million. But the worst part was the cell phone. William scrolled through her recent messages while I watched over his shoulder. The conversation thread with someone named made everything crystal clear. Tonight's the night. Anniversary dinner at Oakwood. You sure about the dosage? Enough to look like a heart attack. Older men have them all the time at fancy restaurants. What if someone suspects? Who's going to suspect a grieving widow? I'll play my part perfectly. Can't wait to start our new life together. Just a few more hours. There were dozens of messages going back months, planning my death like they were organizing a vacation. The detective kept reading, his jaw getting tighter with each exchange. Sir, I'm going to need you to come to the station tomorrow for a full statement, and we'll need to speak with that valet who warned you. Of course. I looked back at the woman on the hospital bed. Tubes running into her arms, machines monitoring her vital signs. Will she survive? The doctors think so. Whatever she used was designed to cause cardiac arrest. But since she's younger and healthier than the intended victim, he closed the phone and slipped it into an evidence bag. She should make a full recovery just in time for her trial. The next few hours passed in a blur of paperwork and police interviews. I called my lawyer, who arrived looking disheveled and concerned. Word was already spreading through our social circle. My phone buzzed constantly with worried texts from friends who'd heard about the accident at the country club. Around midnight, the doctor came back with an update. She's stable. The toxicology report confirms she ingested a compound called digitalis, extracted from foxglove plants. It's a powerful cardiac medication that can be fatal in large doses. She's lucky she's young and healthy. Lucky, I repeated. The word tasted bitter. The good news is there shouldn't be any permanent damage. The bad news is someone clearly knew what they were doing. This wasn't a random poisoning. Detective Williams rejoined us holding a manila folder. We've been in contact with the FBI's cybercrime unit. Your wife's internet history is extensive. She'd been researching this for months. Plant-based poisons, inheritance loss, how to act like a grieving spouse. He opened the folder and showed me printed screenshots. Search terms like natural heart attack causes, sudden death in healthy men, widow inheritance rights, and toxins that don't show up in autopsies. There's more, he continued. We tracked down this M person from her messages. It's a man named Marcus Chun, lives about 40 minutes from here. We've got units heading to his address now. I stared at the evidence spread across the hospital table. 20 years of marriage, and I'd been sleeping next to someone planning my murder. The woman who'd shared my breakfast every morning, who'd kissed me goodbye when I left for work, who'd celebrated every anniversary with seeming joy. How long do you think this has been going on? I asked. Based on the digital evidence, at least 8 months of serious planning, but their relationship. He paused, checking his notes. The earliest messages we found date back almost 2 years. 2 years. She'd been betraying me for 2 years, and I'd never suspected a thing. I thought about all the times she'd seemed distant, all the occasions she'd encouraged me to work late or travel for business. All the times she'd suggested I try new restaurants or take risks I normally wouldn't take. Had she been trying to kill me this whole time, just looking for the right opportunity? The detective's radio crackled to life. "We've got him. Marcus Chun is in custody. Found more evidence at his apartment, including research on the same poison and a detailed timeline for tonight's events." Williams looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. "Sir, I'm sorry you had to go through this. But that valet kid saved your life tonight. If you hadn't switched those glasses, I know." I looked through the hospital room window at my wife's unconscious form. I know exactly what would have happened. The police station at 3 hours in the morning felt like something out of a crime movie. Harsh fluorescent lights, the smell of stale coffee, and Detective Williams looking like he'd been awake for 36 hours straight. But this wasn't entertainment. This was my life falling apart in real time. Before we start the formal interview, I need to tell you what we found at Chen's apartment, Williams said, spreading photos across the metal table. This goes deeper than we initially thought. The pictures showed a detailed timeline pinned to a wall with my daily routines mapped out like a military operation. My gym schedule, my usual lunch spots, the route I took to work, even my favorite hiking trails. They'd been studying me like a lab rat. How long were they watching me? Based on what we found, almost 18 months of surveillance. Shin had photos of you leaving the house, copies of your credit card statements, even your medical records from your last physical. My medical records. How did they get those? Your wife had access to your insurance information. She requested them for family health history purposes. The doctor's office never questioned it. Williams pointed to another photo showing a notebook filled with handwritten observations. They knew your blood pressure, your cholesterol levels, your family history of heart disease. The digitalis was specifically chosen because it would trigger a cardiac event that would look natural given your medical profile. I stared at the evidence, feeling sick. They weren't just planning to kill me. They were planning the perfect murder. That's exactly what they were doing. He pulled out Chin's laptop, already open to a series of documents. Chin's background isn't chemistry. He works at a pharmaceutical research lab downtown. This wasn't some crime of passion. This was a carefully calculated execution plan. The documents were horrifying in their detail. Dosage calculations based on my weight and medical history, timing charts showing when the poison would take effect, even practice scenarios where they'd rehearse different ways to administer it. We found receipts for the foxglove plants purchased from 3 different garden centers over the past 4 months. Williams continued. Chin extracted the digitalis himself using equipment he stole from his lab. They tested the concentration on laboratory in mice first. They tested it on mice multiple times, adjusting the formula until they got the exact effect they wanted. Quick cardiac arrest that would look like a stress-induced heart attack. He turned the laptop screen toward me. But here's the most disturbing part. This wasn't their first choice of method. The screen showed a folder labeled Alternative Plans. Inside were detailed schemes involving car accidents, home invasions, even poisoned food delivered to my office. They'd considered dozens of ways to kill me before settling on the anniversary dinner approach. Why the restaurant? Why not something simpler? Because it was public and romantic. A grieving widow at the scene of their anniversary celebration would generate sympathy, not suspicion. Plus, with all the witnesses and the fancy setting, nobody would think to look for foul play immediately. Williams pulled out another evidence bag containing a second cell phone. We found this in Chen's bedroom. It's your wife's burner phone. The messages on here are explicit about both their relationship and their plans for your money. He handed me printed copies of the messages, and I wished he hadn't. The intimate details of their affair mixed with casual discussions about my death, created a nauseating combination. They'd been planning their new life together, funded by my life insurance. While I worked late to pay for her shopping trips and spa days, the Mo Saint recent message was sent tonight at 6 p.m., just 2 hours before you left for dinner, William said. She texted him, "Last time I have to pretend to love him. By midnight, we'll be free." Free. 20 years of marriage. And she saw my death as freedom. There's something else you need to know. The detective continued. Chen has a criminal record. 2 previous arrests for fraud and a restraining order filed by his ex-girlfriend for stalking and harassment. Your wife knew all of this. So, she chose a criminal as her partner in this. It gets worse. The ex-girlfriend who filed the restraining order. She died in a suspicious car accident 8 months ago. Single vehicle crash on a clear night. No mechanical failures found. The case is still open. The room felt like it was spinning. You think they killed her too? We're reopening that investigation. But based on the timeline, it looks like your wife met Chin right after his ex died. Almost like she was a replacement target, except she had access to more money through you. Williams showed me more evidence bags. Chin's computer contained research on me going back 2 years, including social media photos, property records, and financial information. They'd known more about my life than some of my closest friends. The financial motive is clear, he explained. Between your life insurance policies, your 401k, and the equity in your house, she stood to inherit close to $3 million. Shin had debts from gambling and drug use that totaled almost $500,000. They needed money, and you were their solution. What about my actual life insurance? The policies I knew about those 2. She had increased the coverage on 2 existing policies over the past year, forging your signature on the paperwork. The insurance companies never verified the signatures because she was listed as your spouse. I thought about all the documents she'd asked me to sign over the past year. Just some routine paperwork. She'd always said investment stuff or tax documents. I trusted her completely, signing whatever she put in front of me. The good news is that attempted murder voids all insurance payouts, Williams said. She won't see a penny of your money. The bad news is that Chin's lawyer is already claiming this was all your wife's idea, that she manipulated him into helping her. Is that possible? Anything's possible, but the evidence suggests they were equal partners in this. Chin's research and planning go back just as far as hers. This wasn't manipulation. This was collaboration. My lawyer arrived at 4 a.m., looking grim after reviewing the evidence. This is going to be a media circus, he warned. Attempted murder at an exclusive country club, poison at an anniversary dinner, secret lover with a criminal record. The newspapers are going to love this story. What about the house? Our bank accounts. Everything gets frozen during the investigation, but since you're the victim and she's the perpetrator, you'll eventually get control of the marital assets. The life insurance money she tried to steal will remain with the insurance companies until this is resolved. Detective Williams wrapped up the interview around dawn. We'll need you to testify when this goes to trial, probably in 6 to 8 months. Both your wife and Chun are being charged with attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, and fraud. Chin's also being charged in connection with his ex-girlfriend's death. Will they be tried together? Separate trials. Chin's lawyer is already trying to cut a deal by testifying against your wife. Honor among thieves doesn't apply when you're facing life in prison. I left the police station as the sun was rising over the city. 24 hours ago, I've been a happily married man planning a romantic anniversary dinner. Now I was a widower in everything but name, with a wife in the hospital recovering from her own murder weapon. The valet at the country club had saved my life with 4 simple sentences. If he'd minded his own business, if he'd been afraid to get involved, I'd be in the morgue right now while she played the grieving widow for the cameras. Instead, she was the one fighting for her life, and I was the one walking free into the morning light. Sometimes justice has a sense of irony that you couldn't write in a movie script. The forensic computer specialist looked like he was barely old enough to drink, but Detective Williams assured me he was the best they had. We sat in a sterile conference room while he walked me through the digital evidence that painted a complete picture of my wife's betrayal. "Your wife wasn't just careful about this plan," he said, pulling up file after file on his laptop. "She was obsessive. Look at this spreadsheet." On the screen was a detailed timeline spanning 14 months. Every entry documented my habits, my schedule, my vulnerabilities. They noted which restaurants I preferred, which evenings I worked late, even which medications I took for my occasional back pain. She tracked everything: your mood patterns, your stress levels, when you seemed most distracted or trusting. He scrolled through hundreds of entries. She was building a psychological profile to determine the perfect time and method for your murder. The entries were chilling in their clinical detail. Subject more trusting after successful work presentations. Target drinks more wine when discussing future plans. Best opportunity during romantic settings when guard is down. But here's what really shows premeditation. The specialist continued, opening another folder. She researched digitalis poisoning for 8 months before Chun came into the picture. This wasn't his idea. This was hers from the beginning. The browser history was a roadmap of calculated murder. Medical journals about cardiac arrest symptoms, legal articles about spousal inheritance rights, forums discussing undetectable poisons. She'd even researched acting techniques for appearing genuinely shocked and grieved. When did Shin enter the picture? About 10 months ago, but look at this. He pulled up a dating app profile I'd never seen before. She was actively looking for an accomplice. Her profile specifically targeted men with chemistry or medical backgrounds, men with financial problems, men with criminal records. The profile picture showed my wife in a tight dress I bought her for our last anniversary. The bio read, "Recently widowed. Looking for a fresh start with someone who understands life's complications. Financially secure and ready for adventure." She was already calling herself widowed while I was still alive. Gets worse. She had 3 different men she was considering as partners before she settled on Chun. The other 2 backed out when she started talking about actual murder. Chun was the only one willing to go through with it. Williams rejoined us carrying a thick folder of additional evidence. Chen's been talking. His lawyer thinks cooperation might get him a reduced sentence, so he's giving us everything. What's he saying? That your wife approached him with a fully formed plan. She'd already researched the poison, already mapped out your routines, already increased your insurance coverage. She needed someone with access to laboratory equipment to extract and purify the digitalis. Williams spread out handwritten notes from Chin's confession. According to him, she was the mastermind. She controlled every aspect of the plan, from the timing to the dosage to the cover story. He just provided the chemistry expertise. Do you believe him? Partially. The evidence supports that she initiated everything. But Chin was far from an innocent victim. He helped refine the plan, suggested improvements, even proposed backup methods if the first attempt failed. The backup methods were terrifying. A car accident staged to look like I'd fallen asleep at the wheel. Contaminated food delivered to my office during a busy day. Even a hiking accident where I'd supposedly fallen from a cliff. They had contingency plans for everything, Williams explained. If the anniversary dinner failed, they were prepared to try again within a week using a different method. The computer specialist pulled up Chin's personal files, which included detailed financial projections of their life together after my death. They'd planned to wait 6 months, then get married and move to Costa Rica, where extradition was difficult, and $3 million would last a lifetime. They'd already picked out a house, he said, showing me real estate listings they'd bookmarked. Beachfront property, isolated location, cash purchased to avoid financial scrutiny. What about the ex-girlfriend who died in the car crash? Williams consulted his notes. Chin admits they killed her too, but claims it was your wife's idea. According to him, the ex was threatening to expose their relationship and Chin's criminal activities. Your wife convinced him that eliminating her was necessary for their future together. So, she convinced him to commit one murder to make the second one easier. That's his story. But the digital evidence suggests they were equal partners in both crimes. Your wife researched the ex-girlfriend's driving habits and work schedule. Chin sabotaged her car's brake system using techniques he'd learned online. The scope of their crimes was staggering. 2 murders planned and 1 executed, all for money they'd never even get to spend. And they'd been meticulous about it, treating human lives like obstacles to be removed. There's something else, Williams said, pulling out a manila envelope. We found this in your wife's safety deposit box. A box you didn't know existed, opened under her maiden name. Inside were documents that made my blood run cold. Death certificates for Chin's ex-girlfriend, copies of my medical records with notes about exploitable health vulnerabilities, life insurance policy amendments with forged signatures, and most disturbing of all, a detailed plan for a 3rd murder. A 3rd murder? Your elderly neighbor, the one who sometimes watches your house when you travel. They were planning to kill her too. Make it look like a home invasion gone wrong. She was the only person who might have noticed your wife's unusual behavior or Chin's presence around your house. Mrs. Patterson was 78 years old, lived alone, and had been nothing but kind to us for 15 years. They were planning to murder her simply because she might have been an inconvenient witness. The level of callousness here is extraordinary. Williams said, most people who commit murder do it in the heat of passion or desperation. Your wife and Chun were planning multiple murders like they were organizing a business venture. The computer specialist showed me one final folder labeled Practice Runs. Inside were videos of Chun testing different doses of Digitalis on laboratory animals, with my wife providing commentary and suggestions for improvement. They filmed themselves perfecting the murder weapon, I said, hardly believing what I was seeing. 12 different test sessions over 4 months. They documented everything to make sure they got the dosage exactly right for your body weight and medical condition. I watched my wife of 20 years calmly discussing the most effective way to kill me, taking notes like she was following a recipe. The woman who'd kissed me goodbye that morning, who told me she loved me before we left for dinner, who'd looked me in the eye and toasted to our future together. When did you realize something was wrong in your marriage? Williams asked. I didn't. That's the thing that scares me most. She played the loving wife perfectly right up until the moment she tried to murder me. If that valet hadn't warned me, I'd have died thinking she loved me. Psychopaths are often very good at maintaining facades. The computer specialist said, your wife displayed classic antisocial behavior patterns, but she hid them well enough to fool everyone around her. Williams closed the evidence folders. Both suspects are being held without bail. Chim's trial starts in 3 months. Your wife's in 5. The prosecution is confident they have enough evidence for first-degree murder convictions on both cases. What about the ex-girlfriend's murder? Separate trial for that, but Chin's confession should be enough to convict them both. Your wife's digital fingerprints are all over that planning, too. I left the police station with my head spinning. In less than 24 hours, I learned that my wife was a serial killer, that I'd been living with a psychopath for 2 decades, and that 3 people were dead or nearly dead because of her greed and callousness. But I was alive thanks to a 19-year-old valet who'd had the courage to speak up. I was walking out of that police station instead of being wheeled out of a morgue. My wife had planned the perfect crime, executed it flawlessly, and failed only because she'd underestimated the decency of a stranger who refused to mind his own business. Sometimes the smallest acts of courage change everything. The media storm hit 3 days after her arrest. I woke up to news vans parked outside my house and reporters shouting questions through my windows. Country club poison plot dominated the local headlines, with my wedding photo plastered across every newspaper in the state. My lawyer advised me to stay silent, but the story leaked anyway. Someone at the hospital sold details to the press, and suddenly everyone knew about the anniversary dinner, the switched wine glasses, and the murdered ex-girlfriend. The narrative wrote itself. Wealthy wife tries to poison husband at exclusive club. I took a leave of absence from work and stayed with my brother across town. Even there, reporters found me. They wanted the grieving husband angle, the shocked spouse discovering his wife's secret life. They wanted tears and drama and statements about how love had blinded me. They didn't get any of that from me. My friends' reactions were almost worse than the media attention. Some were supportive, bringing food and offering shoulders to cry on. But others looked at me like I was either incredibly stupid or somehow complicit. How could I not have known? What signs had I missed? Why hadn't I been more suspicious? 20 years and you never suspected anything? My neighbor asked during an awkward conversation at the grocery store. The judgment in her voice was clear. In her mind, I was either a fool or a liar. The country club handled the situation professionally. The manager called personally to apologize and offer counseling services. They'd reviewed their security footage and confirmed the valet's story completely. The kid became a local hero overnight, with news stations interviewing him about his quick thinking. I just did what felt right, he told the cameras. Nobody deserves to be poisoned by someone they trust. My wife's family went into complete denial. Her mother called me crying, insisting there must be some mistake, that her daughter could never do such things. Her sister accused me of framing her to avoid paying alimony in a divorce. They hired their own lawyer and started a public campaign claiming she was the real victim. The insurance companies moved quickly to deny all claims. 3 different policies worth over $2 million were voided the moment she was charged. The investigators found forged signatures on policy increases dating back 18 months, giving them grounds to cancel everything. My lawyer handled the divorce paperwork while she sat in county jail awaiting trial. 20 years of marriage dissolved in a stack of legal documents. I kept the house, the cars, and our joint savings. She kept her criminal charges and her cell. The psychological evaluation was the hardest part. Court-ordered therapy to determine if I needed mental health support after discovering my wife's true nature. The psychiatrist was professional but persistent. Most people in your situation experience severe trust issues, she explained during our 3rd session. You lived with someone for 2 decades who was actively planning your death. That level of betrayal typically requires extensive therapy to process. I'm processing it fine, I told her. She showed me who she really was, and I'm grateful to be alive to see it. You don't feel angry, betrayed, confused about how you missed the signs. I feel relieved. I spent 20 years with a woman who turned out to be a stranger. Now I know the truth, and I can move forward with my actual life instead of the fake one she was controlling. The trial preparation meetings were exhausting. Hours of testimony review, evidence examination, and strategy sessions. The prosecutor was confident but cautious. Defense attorneys in cases like this try to paint the husband as controlling or abusive. She warned me. They'll suggest your wife felt trapped and desperate. Be prepared for character assassination. Let them try. The evidence speaks for itself. Chin's trial started first, and his testimony against my wife was devastating. He described her as the dominant partner, the planner, the one who initiated contact and proposed murder as a solution to their financial problems. She told me killing him would be easy. Chin testified that he trusted her completely and would never suspect anything. She said he was boring anyway, and we deserved to be happy together. The newspapers ate it up. Every detail of their affair, every aspect of their murder plot, every piece of evidence about the ex-girlfriend's death. My private life became public entertainment, dissected and analyzed by strangers with opinions about everything. But I didn't hide. I went to work, shopped for groceries, lived my life normally. When people stared or whispered, I met their eyes directly. I had nothing to be ashamed of. I wasn't the one who'd committed murder. The courtroom was packed when I took the witness stand. My wife sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, looking nothing like the woman who toasted to our future 6 months earlier. She'd lost weight, her hair was shorter, and her eyes held a coldness I'd never noticed before. Or maybe I'd just never been looking for it. The prosecutor walked me through the events of that night, step by step. The anniversary dinner, the valet's warning, the switch glasses, her convulsions. 8 minutes later, I spoke clearly and calmly, sticking to the facts. "Did you love your wife?" the prosecutor asked. "I loved the woman I thought she was. I never knew the real person." Her defense attorney tried to break me during cross-examination. Questions about our marriage, my work schedule, whether I'd been emotionally distant or financially controlling. Classic victim-blaming tactics designed to make the jury sympathetic to a murderer. "Isn't it true that you often worked late and left your wife alone for long periods?" "I worked to provide for our family. She never complained about my schedule." "Did you monitor her spending or restrict her access to money?" "She had full access to all our accounts and spent freely on whatever she wanted." "Were you aware she felt trapped in your marriage?" "She never expressed feeling trapped. She was actively planning our future vacations and talking about retirement together right up until she tried to poison me." The defense painted her as a desperate housewife driven to extremes by an inattentive husband. The prosecution painted her as a calculating killer who'd murdered before and would kill again. The jury saw through the defense's manipulation. Chin had already been convicted and sentenced to life, without parole for 2 counts of first-degree murder. His testimony against my wife was damning, and the digital evidence was overwhelming. The verdict came back after 6 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and accessory to murder in the ex-girlfriend's death. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without possibility of parole. She showed no emotion when the verdict was read. No tears, no remorse, no acknowledgement of the lives she'd destroyed. She simply stared straight ahead as if this was happening to someone else. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed me for a statement. I kept it simple. Justice was served today. My wife chose to become a killer, and now she'll face the consequences of that choice. I'm grateful to be alive and ready to move forward with my life. The Oakwood Country Club held a small ceremony the following week to honor the valet who'd saved my life. They gave him a scholarship fund for college and a permanent job offer after graduation. The kid was embarrassed by the attention, but proud of what he'd done. I keep thinking about what would have happened if I just minded my own business, he told me during the reception. Your wife would have gotten away with murder. But you didn't mind your own business. You chose to get involved, and that choice saved my life. The club also implemented new security measures and staff training on recognizing suspicious behavior. My case had become a cautionary tale, but it had also shown how ordinary people could prevent extraordinary crimes. 6 months after the trial, I sold the house and moved to a smaller place across town. Too many memories in the old neighborhood. Too many conversations about the poison wife case. I wanted a fresh start somewhere people didn't know my story. My new neighbors were friendly, but respectful of my privacy. The mailman didn't stare. The grocery store clerks didn't whisper. I could live normally again, without being the subject of constant gossip and speculation. I started dating again after a year. Nothing serious, just coffee with women who didn't know my history and didn't ask probing questions about my past marriage. Trust came slowly, but it came. The valet graduated from community college and got accepted to State University on a criminal justice scholarship. He wanted to become a police detective, inspired by his role in solving my case. We stayed in touch, meeting for lunch every few months. You know what's funny? He said during one of our conversations, I almost didn't say anything that night. I figured it wasn't my business, and I didn't want to cause problems if I was wrong. What changed your mind? My grandmother always said that evil succeeds when good people stay silent. I couldn't live with myself if something happened to you, and I'd done nothing to prevent it. His grandmother was right. Evil had almost succeeded that night. My wife had planned the perfect crime, recruited the perfect accomplice, and executed her plan flawlessly. She'd failed only because one decent person refused to stay silent. 2 years later, I'm living the life I should have been living all along. No manipulation, no hidden agendas, no fear of the person sleeping next to me. I wake up each morning grateful for simple things, honest conversations, genuine laughter, and the knowledge that I'm surrounded by people who actually care about my well-being. My wife is serving her life sentence in a maximum security prison 3 hours away. I've never visited, never written, never looked back. She made her choices, and now she's living with the consequences. I made mine too. I chose to trust a stranger's warning, to act quickly under pressure, and to move forward instead of dwelling on what might have been. Sometimes the difference between life and death comes down to one moment of courage from an unexpected source. I'm alive today because a 19-year-old valet decided to do the right thing when it mattered most. That's a debt I'll never be able to repay. But it's also a reminder that good people still exist in this world. You just have to be paying attention to recognize them.